The fall of mankind. There was no such thing. There was no such thing in the way that we understand it, or we tend to understand it today. The problem with the so-called fall of mankind is semantics, the meaning of words, or the meaning we attribute to words, connotations, definitions. So a fall is always associated with, or usually, I guess, is associated with something negative. If we speak of the fall of mankind, we usually think of a fall from a higher, more pure, more insightful, unified, a blissful, ecstatic state. Now, the idea I want to convey to you here is that the fall is actually, did actually happen, but is actually a natural process. A natural process of evolution of our state of being. To make this point, I want to start off with a basic understanding of our current human state of being. There seems to be a subjective side and an objective side. The seer and the seen. Consciousness and matter. This could be understood as the divine masculine and the divine feminine in its most abstract aspect. So, from the point in this current cycle of evolution, of cosmic evolution, where the subjective and the objective started to become two distinct, seemingly distinct concepts, things, the objective started to become a mirror of the subjective, since they are the same. Only two different aspects of one and the same, two different phases of one and the same. Like yin and yang, the divine masculine and divine feminine are in fact two different aspects of the Tao, or the hermaphroditic, unified, male-female unified state of being. So, if everything in the objective is always a reflection of the subjective, then so is the world, our earth, Gaia, whatever we want to call it. In fact, our whole world is nothing but ourself, only the seemingly objectified, externalized form of it. And this state of being where we seemingly embody, are incarnated into distinct bodies, into 6-7 billion bodies on the earth, evolved over billions and billions and countless of billions of years. So there was a primordial state, a more primordial state, where consciousness was only beginning to separate from matter, or the subjective was only beginning to separate from the objective. And through time, the subjective and the objective became more and more distinct. The subjective, in this case, of course, being, or always, simply being pure consciousness, and the objective, the vehicle or the carrier of consciousness, or the reflection of consciousness. The reflection of consciousness, which includes a vehicle for it. So over eons and eons and eons and of cycles of time, gradually the subjective, the consciousness, which is one, became more and more distinct from matter, and more and more apart from matter. It started to in a way be more engrossed, more fascinated, more enthralled and interested by the possibilities that an objectification brought with it. So we could imagine some sort of very primordial state of being where consciousness, the subjective, is starting to, out of this primordial unified field of oneness, is starting to externalize colors, feelings, abstract forms of interaction with itself. Concepts. And yes, mainly feelings. And over time, these concepts, feelings, modes of interaction with itself started to become more and more and more concrete, started to become more refined and more crystallized. And for these more refined and more crystallized states of perception and states of being, for that matter, a more refined vehicles and instruments were necessary. So gradually, out of sheer force of will and fascination and drive and curiosity, the interaction of pure consciousness and matter started to produce tools or vehicles or sheaths with which consciousness could experience itself, the reflection of itself, the objectified reflection of itself, in more crystallized, more refined forms. And at this stage, we could still be thinking in highly abstract forms, in abstract concepts, thoughts, emotions, states of being, modes of being dynamic, dancing, doing art, creating. But so gradually, over eons and eons and eons of time, this process, out of sheer force of curiosity and interest and fascination with the reflection, with the objective side of itself, consciousness started to evolve. Consciousness and matter in union, of course, started to evolve into more and more crystallized forms. So it is not consciousness by itself that was evolving, or on the other hand, matter by itself that was evolving, that caused the other side to evolve with it. No, both are two phases of one and the same thing. So in the moment that consciousness defined a more concrete desire for objectification, matter immediately became that. And so on and on over eons. It evolved until, at some point, something resembling space, time and space, started to appear. Something resembling a space in which objects could coalesce, could form, as we understand objects to be. And this became more and more concrete to that point where experience in this state of subject-object relation required a body that resembled our physical body in some way. And so through sheer force of curiosity, fascination, interest in the reflection of itself, force of just desiring to play, to discover, to be creatively, dynamically. The cosmos, the subject-object unity, formed more and more concrete forms of matter and possibilities to experience that matter, which in other words became bodies. First ethereal, highly ethereal, abstract bodies, and then more and more concrete bodies. So we hear of the primordial races of humanity, the past races of humanity, and the past cycles of races of humanity, which of course would be a subject for a whole different video. But races of giants, races of completely different types of humanity, which were all just a part of this evolution of vehicles for the experience of the objective. So with time, we came to this, where we are now, Earth, which is nothing else than simply the reflection of ourself, the reflection of our being, the objectified phase of our being. Trees, clouds, sun, moon, all the phenomena, rain, thunder, rainbows, the stars at night, the infinite, what we perceive as the infinite cosmos with all its galaxies, simply a reflection of ourself, nothing else. So that is way I understand, and I would like to express my understanding of the fall, the so-called fall of man. It's nothing more than the subjective, pure consciousness being imbued in, engrossed by, fascinated by curious about the objectified, externalized reflection of itself. The divine masculine by the divine feminine. So the fall is nothing more but the result of the infinite play of yin and yang, the divine masculine and the divine feminine, the pure subjective and the pure objective, pure consciousness and pure matter, playing and mingling and dancing with each other through eons and eons and eons of time, untold billions and billions of years of time. And the result of it is an experience we call human, in which we are apparently separate entities, living apparently on a globe floating in space, in infinite space.